The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds.
You're listening to Rooted in Organic Podcast. I'm Mike Klein along with Brian Wood. Today we are talking to Melissa Weyland from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Melissa is a former co-worker and branched out and started her own dairy farm from the bottom up. Melissa was a guest back in 2020, and we wanted to check back in with her and get an update as a lot has changed in her life. And I want to hear the story about how you branched out in faith and started your own dairy farm. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. And can you kind of bring us along in the journey of you, I guess, having the guts to do this, because this is not a simple undertaking by any stretch.
I would be delighted to share this story. You had used the word faith, and I think that was very much something I relied on when starting a dairy. So the last time I had done a recording with you, I had been actually on my home family farm. So I think I want to do a little bit of justice of that there. So my mom and dad were organic dairy farmers for over 20 years. So they were fairly early joiners of the Organic Valley Truck in eastern Wisconsin. And I had grown up on this farm. And so the home family farm really meant a lot to me. If some of you have maybe heard the quote where the farm, you weren't raised on a farm, the farm raised you. And I very much resonate with that. And the home farm really had and has a lot of my heart. However, in 2000, very late 2000, and I think 19, it would have been, my years might not be perfect. My dad and I were actually working on a succession plan, and I had planned to take over the home family farm. That really meant a lot to me. This is a dairy of 130 milk cows and operated just under 1,000 acres at the time. And our plan was for me to take over the dairy portion. And that was really my goal my whole life. I knew since I was very little that I wanted to dairy farm. That is something that I always felt I was kind of good at. And I also really enjoy working with cows, and I really enjoy caring for the land in these ways. So my dad and I had been working through that plan. We had a couple of meetings with a succession attorney who was advising us and so on and so forth. But long story short, it ended up not working out. My dad had really gotten cold feet about the whole transition. He really seemed, he just kind of shifted, and it was very evident that he really wasn't ready to let go of the farm or to have this happen. And so he and I, and believe it or not, this was very cordial. He and I went our separate ways. I say that it was very cordial, but I also don't want to downplay the emotion and how hard I know that was, honestly, for him, for my mom, and for me. So I think that separation happened, I want to say, in late 2021. We had been working on this for 2 years prior. And at that point, when we had gone our separate ways, I owned a house just really close to the family farm. So I was going past the farm every single day, and so on and so forth, and still in the area. And I fell into a pretty deep depression. That was really hard for me to leave the farm and accept that this was what it would be. And then at the same time, there was this nagging feeling like, hey, he'll come around. He's going to call one day and this is all going to get sorted out and we are going to go forward with this succession and the cows will be there on the home farm forever, or at least for my lifetime, and it will be great. Instead of ever getting that call, the call that I did get, or the text I did get, was actually from another Organic Valley farmer a few months later who was sending me an ad for a cow auction that happened to be for my home farm's cows, for my family farm cows. And that was how I had found out that my dad had decided he was also done dairying, and the way that he would be done was to send the cows to a local organic auction barn. So at that point, was still really battling those hard days and really that depression. Frankly, those of you who are diehard farmers in your heart could probably relate to this. If you walk away from farming, you feel like you have lost a part of you. And so I got this auction ad, and it was certainly very emotional, but at the same time, I had just really started to think very seriously of, okay, what next? We've gotten this far. I've known this is what I've always wanted to do. I thought very recently, only a couple months prior, that this was what I was going to do. Now what? And that was when I actually started to think, should I go buy those cows? An auction is public. Maybe this is how I'm going to get these cows. And long story short, I called our good friend and colleague, Kevin Keno, that day. And I said, hey, this is what's going on. Obviously, it was a bit of an emotional call for me, but at the same time, Kevin was really able to help break this out into an actionable plan with me. And it really completely shifted my perspective. So what I did from there, so I had about 10 days, it was 7 business days, I believe, before this auction was happening. The auction advertising isn't up for months or weeks in advance. Usually there's a pretty quick turnaround on a herd dispersal. And I, at that point, thought, well, I could do this, but I need a lot of things. I need a farm. I need a farm to rent. I need feed. This was in March, so I had no feed to feed these cows. I needed organic feed at that. I needed also a milk market. And ironically, at this time, Organic Valley was not looking for milk, but I was bound and determined if I was going to pull this off, it was really, really important to me to become an Organic Valley member owner. I felt by taking this risk, and if this all came together, I would be safe and taken care of with OV. That was a deal breaker for me. So what had ended up happening is there was a member owner who, due to health issues, had sold his milking herd, and he was on temporary stop. He was on a stop status with OV. But what that meant is that member would have the opportunity to come back on the truck. And what we ended up doing, I called him up and I said, hey, this is really crazy. His wife answered the phone. I said, this is really crazy. It's Melissa Weyland. Do you remember me? Oh, yeah, of course. I said, do you think you all would ever want to rent your farm to someone to help them get started? By the way, that someone is me. She's just kind of thought, she was really kind. She said, I will talk to my husband when he gets home. He's at church right now. I will let you know, or he'll let you know. And he called me a couple hours later and he said, actually, I would do that to help you get started. He's like, let me go out and check some things in the milk house and in the barn to see if this is feasible in 10 days. Because if you've ever known a dairy that has sat for a year at this point, any milking facility that sits for a year will have a good amount of work to get it back up to grade A compliance. So it all came through. He said, let's do this. If this works out, keep in touch with us on your cow financing. which was step 2. I didn't have cows were $2,000 a piece at that time. Good cow, really good cows were. I didn't have 70 cows worth of that money sitting around. So I had to finance these animals. And that was probably the hardest part in my journey. I had called several lenders in that time. I had lenders actually chuckle and laugh at me on the phone that I would want to start a dairy with. I had been using the number 60 cows. I had someone tell me, why would you start a 60 cow dairy at this day and age? And I just had a lot of individuals telling me, oh, go to FSA, which then I would explain, yes, that sounds like a great solution, but when you only have 7 business days to secure cow funding, that's not really realistic. So I actually called a different Organic Valley member after many local banks and credit unions and such turning me down to get some advice. This was a member that had also started up fairly recently. And he advised me of a bank that tended to be more organic friendly, with that he had a really great relationship with. And long story short, that ended up working out. I got the call on the Friday before the Wednesday that the auction was happening. She had called me up and I could tell I was approved by the tone in her voice. She was very happy to relay that message. She made it very clear they want to support beginning farmers, and especially organic farmers. And so that next Wednesday, I went to that auction and I bought my cows, my home farm cows, one by one as they walked through the ring. I don't really know where that strength or that motive or who that version of me was. But I just sat there and I just kept bidding. I had one of my sisters on my right-hand side there for moral support and emotional support, and my partner Roy on my left side, and his job was to make sure I didn't overspend. So he was tallying what each cow I got them for, to keep us within the budget. And of the 70 cows that were left that went through that were from my home farm, I got 60 of them. So we did pretty good. Loaded them up that day. There were truckers on site. We were prepared. I also had gotten to the point that when I had bought a few cows, I bought like 5 cows. It was like, okay, I can't just milk 10 cows or 15 cows. Like, I have to get as many of these cows as I can. So I did. We loaded them up. I think it took 4 trailer loads. These were just the lower trailer sizes. The 4 trailer loads, and then we headed east to the other side of Wisconsin, way up in northeast Wisconsin, to the farm that I would rent for my first year and a half dairying. So we sat up, I think, until 1 a.m. that night. This was a very small step-up parlor setup. My cows had never, ever done a step-up. These cows were tie stall cows. And they had free stalls too, but they were tie stall cows, and that step was pretty miserable until the wee hours of the morning. And then it wasn't easy from there. Yes, we had the cows, but that first year of farming was really, really tough. It was tough financially. It was tough. I was still processing a lot of the emotion of leaving the farm, and almost a lot of maybe the shock or adrenaline that it took to get to that point. And so for about 6 months, I was just kind of this little bit high strung, high stress. And then one day I just sort of realized, I always wanted to farm. This is my dream. It's time to start making this my own. And it's time to start just doing a really good job with the cows, which is something I knew how to do. I grew up in an Organic Valley dairy, and that was what I did. And so that really is, I think, chapter 1 of the story so far.
So I want to go back to what you said about, once you had 5 cows, that you knew that you couldn't just milk 10 cows. Like, what was that feeling like, knowing that you took this giant step and there is no backing out of it now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There actually was some critiquing from the outside that said, why did you buy so many cows? And I was like, well, 60 is not that many. And I think, Mike, since I grew up on 130 cow dairy, that number felt more manageable for me. I will be honest, I know my math. And I knew in all of my financial projections, I had been running these financial projections for a couple years. I really knew I couldn't start at less than 50 cows. I knew that. I needed to buy some feed. I had a barn rent, right? And things like that. And so there was this point where it was like, well, you buy 10, okay, we need to ship enough milk, but also we have to be able to now cash flow this.
Well, it's hard enough thinking about starting up a dairy, let alone doing it in 7 days or 10 days or whatever it was. But, as far as I'm just trying to think of like the logistics, there's the buying of the cows and there's the feed, but then there's also like, I'm assuming you're working at the time and you have to move to a whole new place. You have to get used to a whole new operation. You kind of gave the big picture of, getting the cows there, but what about all the other little logistics? The stress level is coming through. I'm feeling it myself.
I am too, Brian. Like, this is stressing me out.
That was part of the issue. Was I had a whole life before the 10 days before this cow sale. Yeah, I had a house. I had a mortgage payment that I didn't have time to pack that house up. I didn't have time to move that whole house. I also was moving to an area, the farm that I was renting was in a really neat area, but it was an area where there's almost no housing. So Roy and I had a really hard time even finding a rental to live in. And temporarily for a month after we moved the cows, we actually lived in a vacation rental that was right on Lake Michigan, because this is where our farm was, just so that we could be close to the cows. We were almost 2 hours. I moved my cows almost 2 hours away from home at that point. And so luckily I had family and friends and things like that that could watch and take care of my house. And we eventually did get it packed up, and I did eventually end up selling my house. But that entire transition as a human, I was all in on the cows. We weren't taking care of ourselves. We were just surviving at that point. The job I was working at the time, I was actually a general manager for a local meat and veggie co-op of farmers here. And they, being very mission oriented, they actually were incredibly supportive. They were like, hey, you go for it. You go chase this dream. And so they were very kind with my exit and allowing me actually to transition out and I kind of dropped down to part-time hours right away and so on and so forth. So luckily I had a lot of support come through to help with that, but that transition as a human was really hard.
If this question, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but with you not taking over the family farm, your dad decided to sell the cows, and I'm sure your dad was at the auction, I imagine. Like, Did you have this conversation with your family that you're going to try to do this, or did they realize this when you said your sister was with you and obviously Roy, but or was this just a complete shock that, oh my goodness, she's going to do this?
It was something I kept to myself. I only told my two sisters and Roy, of course. Since this all happened so fast, truthfully, I just had to be very focused on the mechanics of it. I had to find a farm. I had to get the money. I had to get grade A. I had to get this, make sure the cert was okay. We had to work things out with OV, so on and so forth. That all of that kind of busier stuff, there just wasn't even time for to have any of those conversations. Also, the cow auction was happening. It happened on my mom's birthday. And so what had happened is through the hustle and bustle, my sister, I couldn't step out of the parlor when we were training cows. My sister stepped out of the parlor. I'm going to cry. My sister stepped out and called my mom to wish her a happy birthday. And then she told her then that I had bought the cows, and my mom was completely shocked, but also very happy. So that she said that was the best birthday present she could have ever had. She had no idea because she hadn't gone to the auction. And I had farmed with my mom my whole life, by the way. My mom was very much a farm woman. So that was one piece of it. And then the second piece, yes, my dad was there. I will never, ever forget him walking in that door. And I will never forget realizing in that moment, I'm trying to hold it together, that he was hurting as much as I was, that these cows were being sold. And he didn't figure out, I don't think, until maybe halfway through the auction, who had this number that was buying all of these cows, because it was like boom, 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 one right after the other. And at some point, I think someone sitting next to him, or he just figured it out that it was actually me. So at the end of the day, it didn't take maybe that first 2 years, my dad didn't visit us, but then he did come and see his old cows on our second farm. So we didn't get to this part of the story, but I did move farms. So anyway, it's all good now, but yeah, it was emotional. You have an entire family invested in this herd of cows, not just me as an individual, right? So I very much recognize how, it was emotional for everyone.
I like this story just blows me away, how things got done. And like you mentioned, and Brian, reiterated the 7 to 10 day window. We see people work for months, if not years, to get everything in order, and you to throw this that was clearly meant to be.
It was meant to be. Should I touch on the divine intervention, if you will, if that's one word, one way to describe it?
Absolutely.
The community. Okay. So I had felt during this process, because this was so big, like you had just said, Mike, a lot of things had to happen. There was a moment about halfway through, before the auction had even started, that just felt a lot bigger than me. This was way, way bigger than me. Yes, I was the human in it. I was the vessel, if you will. But the fact that there was a man and a family willing to rent me their farm in 10 days, who at that point, they had never even thought of this. The fact that that person could rent me their farm, the fact that they happened to have been running wash cycles. This is a little thing. They happen to have been running wash cycles and caring for their milking system, which isn't common when someone retires or quits, but they were upkeeping it. That family also had an entire season's worth of feed on hand. He had all of the organic certified baleage and grain in his bin on the farm that I was able to use right away. So that eliminated a barrier. But it got way deeper than that for this story. There was an NFO rep, that's National Farmers Organization, that's a milk handler in my region. There was a gentleman named Steve Grashik that I had worked with when I'd worked with OB for many years. I will never forget him coming in. He visited this farm 3 times. And at one point, he's like in there helping me source a wash sink just to make sure we got grade A. And he was able to get us grade A ready in an unrealistic time. Let's just put it that way. Additionally, the funding, the financing, I really had a hard time. It really hit me a little bit when lenders were kind of laughing at me, and it was really discouraging that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. When that lender had called me to tell me that she had gotten me the loan, she explained to me, she said, by the way, we do some background checking, some reference checking of folks. We ask if anyone knows you within our organization. And someone had come forward, and he had a lot of really good things to say. And that someone actually was Dr. Paul. And Dr. Paul passed away shortly after we started farming. I never got to have him come up. I sure wish I did, but Dr. Paul had provided as this sort of quiet reference, which she's not supposed to tell me, but I love this story so much. I'd worked with Dr. Paul over the years and gotten to know him, and Dr. Paul said, yes, she is going to do great farming. She's going to do really well. Fund her, get her that money, buy those cows. So that was really meaningful, because when we work with individuals like Dr. Paul, who we just think so highly of, we don't always realize there'll be a boomerang coming back to you of them also saying good things about you, right? Then the auctioneer someone had filled him in on what was going on. There were people bidding against me, but after each cow, the auctioneer would stop. This is a little bit later in the auction, but he'd say, Melissa, do you want to keep going? And he would just like check if I passed on any cows. So yeah, my point is there was so much community and something much bigger than me that had happened in the process. And I have to just forgive myself here because I'm not remembering everyone who had called or reached out or who had played a part in it. I'm only sharing a small piece. But I think when we are going through something and we realize it's bigger than us, that's when I don't want to say I didn't step back. I had to be very proactive to rise this farm out of nothing in 7 business days. But also you just realize this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's incredible. And you said to rise this farm out, that you had to do a lot of work, and absolutely. And as you just said, there's a community of people along with you that allowed for you to actually take those steps, that were actively helping you. And I mean, you just gave. And one thing that just struck me, Mel, is that, your background of being raised on a farm is also what allowed you to do it in 7 to 10 business days. So in a way, your family was its own help and assistance in being able to get you where you're at today. That's amazing.
I have always said I didn't walk away from the farm with nothing. I walked away from the farm with experience and with knowledge that I have been able to use. I also want to touch on, when you look at this community that really assisted and was a part of this, I had spent 12 years almost professionally in the organic dairy industry, and I felt like all of the good and all of the helping and all of the working with all of these other organic dairy farmers that were suddenly helping me, I felt like that was coming back to me tenfold, way more than I could ever have deserved. There was somebody that gave me like 6 months or a year to pay off some corn. I mean, just the help. I can't believe it.
And isn't it, when the helping other people is very rewarding, and getting the help is humbling and overwhelming. We don't help people for the return.
No.
It's just what happens. You do the right thing. It is karma. But how farmers and people, industry people, banded together to make this happen. It was a whole community. It's such a great story. So now we're through the first farm, and kind of the end of chapter 1. So hopefully the end of chapter 1 is a little bit less stress than the beginning of chapter 1. So because I just cannot wrap my head around the anxiety and the stress that would have happened in that 10 days leading up to this. But it's like the stress and everything of the 10 days is incredible, but now you've got to make it happen. So it's not like, oh, okay, now this is over. Now it's just put it on cruise control, because you've got to actually run a dairy that is profitable.
Yep.
So, so I guess we're kind of ready for, I guess, chapter 2, so to speak.
Okay, so I want to make sure I don't miss this point. So any of you that have ever struggled with mental health at any point in your life, you know that deep, dark space that you can get into. And I had gone into buying cows already in that space, and buying cows and pushing myself to absolutely nothing. I was putting everything into the startup dairy. Um, just buying the cows didn't solve that, right? I didn't solve that depression that I was going into this whole thing with. And I will never forget that point. I know it was around 6 months, because it was in the grazing season. It was later in the grazing season. I remember struggling so much with my mental health and just feeling like I couldn't do this. I almost felt like I couldn't function. I don't know what it was. I had a rough night one night, just really overcome with emotion, and was telling Roy, like, I don't know, I actually don't know if we should keep doing this. Like, I know we got this far, but I don't know if we should keep going. And he was, Roy's a really great listener and a really great man and a really great person. And he was like, well, we got this far. Let's just stay steady. And just, let's just keep going. We're still very new in this. And, one morning I had woke up, Mike, and I had that realization, I need to run a dairy now. I can't sit here and sulk in my past. I can't sit here and be sad that I left home. I can't sit here and stress about all of this stuff because I have to run this farm. So I don't know. I woke up, had a bad night, and then I woke up the next day and I said, I'm not living that way anymore. And now it's going all business. And I flipped a switch, and I don't know what it was. I just flipped that switch somehow, mentally, emotionally, and I did start thinking bigger. I thought, gosh, I love this. We really liked the farm that we were first on. We liked it a lot for a lot of reasons, but it was also very tired. That farm was really wore out, and there were a significant amount of financial investments that started coming our way or needing to happen in that first year. Different things that needed to be upgraded in the milk house or so on and so forth. And again, we were renting. And I started to think long term, what are my goals? Where do I want to be? And our number one goal, Roy and I's number one goal, was that we wanted to be closer to home if we could. We were 2 hours away. It was really hard for our family to visit. Roy has aging parents. It was really hard for him to be that far away. So our number one goal up on the wall on a board was be closer to home. And then we also wanted to get to a more modern facility. We didn't know when or how. We didn't know if we would be buying or renting. We were just throwing stuff at the wall, right? Brainstorming those goals. And I started to learn now, deep dive into the real life math. I was sharing, I knew my projected math and I knew my projected cash flow, and that was not what was happening when I had finally started. So I had began to I had a clearer head at this point, much more focused on the goals, and started thinking about, okay, where do I need to take this thing to survive? Starting a dairy in 2022 was not easy. March of 2022, we started. And the numbers were very different than the numbers of what things would have looked like had I taken over on the home farm. Had I taken over on the home farm, I would have had a lot of amenities that I didn't have on my startup farm. So we had just been thinking, and then we've always kept that goal in our mind, and we kept making connections. We made sure to stay connected with our Organic Valley reps. We made sure to stay connected with Marble Seed for different opportunities, just to be aware, right? Not running or jumping, just to be aware of whatever might come. And about a year later, so this would have been the fall or the summer of 2023, one of our a different Organic Valley farmer friend, who had a robotic milking system. He had come out to visit us a couple times and just see how we were doing and see how things were going. And I had bought a couple heifer calves from him, just a couple little things. And he had shared with us at that time, he said, he had been farming by himself for 10 years with one robot. He had said, I'm getting really tired. I don't think I'm going to stay in dairy very long. I will either consider bringing a manager on, or maybe I'll just exit from dairy in general. And that had been in the spring. It was around tax time because I had met with my accountant one day and I had done my taxes for my first year farming. And he had a really harsh talk with me. By the way, I'm using my accountant that I had known my entire life. My mom and dad used him, so I knew he was really good. And that man sat back in his chair and he had a really tough talk with me about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make it farming in the numbers that he was seeing. And anyway, that had really changed my perspective. And I had gotten home and I told Roy about how taxes went. And I said, yeah, I don't know. This guy's name's Mike. Mike just really gave me a talk. I said, okay. I said, there's just like a few things we need to work on. And he had some perspective to share. And so Roy kind of said, this is a couple weeks later now. We had been thinking about this goal and thinking about how hard it would be at this kind of rundown farm that we started on. And one day Roy says, hey, we should call up Andy. This is our current landlord, by the way. We should call up Andy and just see if he ever would want to rent his farm. He's talking about getting a manager or selling his cows. Maybe he wants to rent his farm. And I was like, do you want to go to robots? I was like, that sounds terrible. I enjoy milking cows. And Roy's just totally opposite. He's just very open-minded, and he's like, well, I don't know. You don't have to have a robot there. You could do a parlor there too. So just for giggles, I think we had come over. We had a visit with Andy at one point, and we tossed the idea about renting to him. And he actually said, yeah, I actually would consider that. It would be really unique because I have this robot though. How would we do that? And so then that started 6 months of us just brainstorming some more. Like hypothetically, if we moved to this farm with a robot, what would that look like? What would the cash flow look like? Would we buy the robot? Would we write all these things that you discuss? And so I think it's so funny. I started a farm in 10 days once, but then I took many, 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 many months of planning before actually moving farms. So that one was much more thought out. And long story short, in October of 2023, we moved on Halloween. We had a blizzard, so we moved our cows to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And that's where we are now, and we love it. We started here with our 60 cows on one robot, and I'm really excited to say that here in July, we actually added a second robot in this facility. There was a nice space for it. It worked out really well. So we are now a 2-robot farm. We are going to milk about 95 cows on 2 robots because we also want to maximize on grazing and pasture DMI. Just because we have a robot doesn't mean we want low pasture DMIs. So that is a summary of chapter 2 and where we are now.
So not only did you take comfort stall cows into a step-up parlor, and then you had to change up again and then get them trained for the robots. So I do remember getting a picture from you of Roy laying on the couch wearing the boots and everything because you guys have been up all night, which I still find hilarious. How was it training the cows to go into the robots from step-up parlor?
Miserable. It was as hard as that step-up parlor training. It was absolutely awful. It was terrible. I, though, now have cows. I have cows, you guys, that were on 3 farms with me. I have a whole group of them, like a few dozen. And these cows have a PhD in milking systems. They could walk into any stall barn or any parlor or now a robot, and they'll know what to do. So I don't know if that counts for something, but yeah, these cows, nothing surprises them with me anymore. I'm going to tell you that.
That's so cool. I've talked to different farms that have switched to robots, and the learning curve is steep. So I can only imagine doing that twice on 2 farms. But luckily, you had cows that you were at least accustomed to, I guess, would be the silver lining.
In looking back, that learning curve was probably harder for me than anyone. I am more stubborn than anything. And there was a point where it was like, okay, Melissa, just get out of the barn. Let these cows, they're figuring it out, right? Sometimes we need to get out of our cows' ways.
That was going to be my question, Mel, of, what was the learning curve for you? And you kind of touched on that. And then you also touched on pasturing with robots. And I know other farmers, we've had on other farmers that have robots, and that can be a definite learning curve in itself as well. So, like, what has been the logistics and layout of being able to maximize pasture with robots?
I would first just throw a little tidbit in that if anybody would be considering going to robots, do what we did, where we actually started our cows at the end of the season was over for grazing. We were coming into November. We had already had several frosts. We had a blizzard the day that we moved, because that allowed a really solid winter period, at least with our seasons, to focus on the internal of training the cows, and then the cows are actually around the robot. But yes, Brian, when it got to that first grazing season, that was also so hard. So I had, I don't know, over 20 years of grazing experience already on 2 different farms. So I'm going into this robot grazing thinking I know it all. And that's our number one problem in life, is when we think we know it all just because we did something for 20 years. Not true. I had to actually completely relearn cow psychology and grazing, because I was no longer forcing my cows to go certain places when I wanted them there. At this time, our cows are completely free flow. And so I had to get in my cows' heads last year to learn, okay, how do I get them to go out to this pasture on their own and also come back to the barn on their own? And my number one struggle last year was my cows wouldn't come back to the barn. They're like, the grazing here is so awesome, I'm never going to go back and milk. And it was like really hard to keep my herd even hitting 2 visits a day. It was absolutely terrible. So I reworked a whole bunch of things this year. I just observed a lot last year, which I'm really grateful. At some point, I got so frustrated. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to watch the cows and learn from them and be their student. Best thing I did, because this year grazing has been so awesome. We hit almost 3.5, or at least 3.2 visits, which when you're organic and you're a grazer is so good. But also my cows spend a lot of time out on pasture. I don't dip below, at any point, I don't dip below 50% DMI from pasture, which with a robot, I'm really happy with. But I'm also really excited now with 2 robots to hopefully maximize that and see how much forage I can make sure our cows are getting from pasture. But yeah, the learning curve was so significant, and there's not, in my opinion, there's not a lot of resources or training to graze really well with it. There's a lot of resources to graze pretty minimally with the robot, 30% dry matter, sure. But when your goals are over 50, it gets tricky, because you can't have cows in 2 places at once, as you know, but you also have to get your cows to do things that you want them to do without forcing them. At least that was my goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that does bring up just another kind of broader question of, I working with farmers, there's definitely a certain way of doing things on every farm you go to, right? And I'm sure that's the same it was on your family farm growing up, and you just went through, your humbling experience of learning grazing in a whole new system. What other aspects of farming were you, I'll call it humbled, but we'll just say a learning experience, or had to adjust because it was very different than you expected or came into knowing? What were the other spots you had to do some learning?
I really think grazing with the robot is actually the only one standing out to me. As far as herd management, that all got to stay the same, right? You do this for this, or this is your protocol for this, or this is your SOP for that. I got to work with 2 different farmers. So 3, if you include my mom and dad. I got to work with 3 different farmers on crops now. And it wasn't humbling or like, it was just really neat because you hit the nail on the head. They all farmed completely differently. And the second you come on their farm as a renter and you do these things that you've done your whole life, they kind of look at you sideways and you're kind of looking at them sideways like, what? Why do you do it that way? So I think if anything, it was just a really, I don't know, really great that through this entire journey, I got to work with 3 different farmers with, yes, completely different mindsets. And frankly, my own anyway now, right?
I'd
So
say
do
you
you
got the PhD along with your cows, Mel.
Yeah, you work one-on-one. I will tell you what, anyone who wants to get in farming, work one-on-one with many different farmers before you start because it's pretty unbelievable the different opinions or experiences you'll absorb.
But I think with that, Mel, isn't it amazing how what absolutely works perfectly on one farm, you go to another one and they're trying to do the same thing and it does not work.
Yeah, and I think what's super neat though is the 3 farms I've been on. I'll try not to sidetrack too much here. The 3 farms I've been on have all had completely different soil types. And in the industry, when you work in industry, you know that those things matter, right? Like we have training, we are on farms, we see those things. But for me to have spent a couple years working with each of those soil types and each of those grazing blends, for example, oh my gosh, that was humbling in itself. If I ever had any advice for anyone getting into grazing or organic cropping, get to know your land. I've had to get to know the land now on 3 farms, and the way I manage on each one now is completely different because the land has different needs.
And you'll never stop learning, hopefully.
Right. One year's dry, one year's wet.
Hmm.
One year's just right.
Do you raise most of your own feed?
Yeah, we do. We raise a lot of our own feed. On farm. This is really neat. So we actually have a landlord who is he has the full line of equipment, and so we're able to work really closely with him for all of the custom work. And the upper hand with that is that the equipment is always there, right? And you're managing the land together in a way. And so we are doing things that are the best rotation for the land, for example, or we're able to do things really timely because we're all working towards one goal, even though technically we're hiring a lot of this work out. We're really teamed up. So in total in our system, I think we're running 230 acres. And we are able to supply a lot of our feed, at least our corn silage, for example, and a good amount of forage.
And do you feed a pellet in the robots?
Oh, that's a great question. I have never fed a pellet. Actually, this is more of a personal thing. It's really important to me to feed either homegrown feeds or locally sourced organic feeds. And so I've been able to, over time, really tweak and figure this out where I will feed mostly ground corn, but that ground corn, I may add oats or barley or something else. Ground corn with the minerals. And then I also really like for the robot attractant, a roasted soybean. Roasted soybean isn't the best when you're a really good grazer. You really don't need all that protein. But the cool thing about the robot is I can make those adjustments. When you're grazing every day is different, especially when you change fields, right? So what's so cool is when I switch a field, I actually can make that adjustment right on the computer. It takes me 5 minutes. So I just feed grain and protein through the robot.
So when you move the cows to a fresh paddock, will you then look to see how many legumes are in there? So this has got more legumes, so the protein's going to be higher, then you just adjust that in the amount of beans that are being fed in the robot?
Legumes, and then also if it depends sometimes too, Mike, on my rest days, but it also depends on the weather. Right now I'm really starting to sound like when you're farming. There's just a lot of variables. I will be completely honest with you. I watch their manure. I watch manure like a hawk. I walk that barn every single day. I walk those pastures every single day. I watch that manure, and then I do use my muns. Muns are probably also my second tool.
I want to explain MUN because we
Okay.
love acronyms, like that is the milk urea nitrogen, which is the bypass protein that the cow doesn't absorb. Is that right?
That's right. So it's a signal she's getting too much protein, which will usually align with what I'm seeing in the manure on the pasture or in the barn, right? It'll be a bit too runny, or it'll even look oily at times, so on and so forth. So I really use both of that. Yep.
Do you work with a nutritionist or do you balance your own rations for the cows?
I actually do it all on my own. Reason being is I feel fairly confident in it. I'm no nutritionist. I feel very confident in it, but I don't know. I just feel like I can do a lot by watching manure. And our ration is simple. It's forage, pasture, a little bit of corn, a little bit of beans.
Do you feed silage during the corn silage during the summer too, or just during the winter?
Yes, I try to keep the corn silage in the summer. Um, it's just a really great complement to pasture. Yeah, especially good pasture.
It really is a wonderful complement to pasture.
hmm
Well, I can vouch that your ration seems to be working because I have gotten some pictures from the robot on milk production and they've been super impressive. So you're doing something right there. You don't show me the bottom end of the scale. I know that.
Yeah. Well, it's so neat with a robot as the cow adjusts to what she needs. So I have cows that as they're approaching dry off, they'll drop down to once a milking on their own. And then they show up on something called a fetch list, which is like the naughty list. It means they don't go in enough. And I just look at those cows. I'm like, no, that's really what Vanessa needs. She really only needs to come in once a day. And just because I have a robot doesn't mean I'm this, we're not generally production pushers, dare I use that term, right? We're focused on rumen health and cow health.
Back to watching manure, here a couple months ago, had a meeting where we were asked some farmers to talk about how they increased milk production, and we had them talking about adding some grain or timing of forage cutting, and I can't remember the other topics that we had. And what wound up happening in that meeting was we got into the art and science of watching manure and the shape and the color and the smell and the everything. I thought it went a little bit off the rails at first, but then I was like, you know what? No, this is what they're watching. So
Yeah. Yep.
one other question I was going to ask Mel was, and I'm a numbers guy, so I can't help but ask it. Has the conversations with your accountant gotten a little bit easier since that first sit down?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It sounds insane because I make a robot payment now, plus all the rent I used to. Now I'm adding, well, actually, Brian, I should see what he says this end of this year when I explain that we added a robot and he sees that. No, he's just really impressed with how quickly things changed.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What changes are you going to make this upcoming year?
Actually, I'm shifting. I'm going to be honest. I've just really worked. We've really worked hard. We want to start enjoying what we're doing. We want to make sure we're taking time to, when we go out to the pasture, when I go out to the pasture to move the poly wire, I want to enjoy the monarchs and the swallowtails and the birds. I don't want to rush back for the next project anymore.
It seems like you've hit that perfect stage
Yeah.
where you need to take time to smell the roses. But it is very cool to see you guys have been through a lot. You have done some amazing things through trials, tribulations, whatever you wins, losses, whatever you want to call it. But for you to recognize now that maybe it is time to enjoy the fruits of your labor a little bit, obviously not backing off on doing your work, But to take that step back, I think that's where life becomes very wonderful, is in
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that. So I commend you for
Mm-hmm.
doing that, and it's this story has been incredible, Mel, and I can't thank you enough for sharing this with us.
Mm-hmm. You're so welcome. I'm so glad to be here, and I don't know, it was really hard. Both the chapters I shared with you were really hard, but I'm just so happy that, like, I watch the birds and the swallow. I was watching all these different swallowtails, which is a butterfly this year, and it feels exciting. And yes, I still look at the poop, but like looking at the manure is fun when it looks right, right?
That will only make sense to somebody who understands dairy farming.
A dairy cow, yeah.
Well, Mel, thank you so much. This story is incredible. I wish you and Roy nothing but the best. This is exciting. Hopefully, one day I'll be up in that area. I definitely want to stop in and see the operation. But just thanks for taking the time. I know you've been super busy, but thanks for sharing this with us.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Mel.